we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven. That which we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today we're going to be talking about a very cool product from Bear Creek Arsenal, one that I wanted to bring you a little while ago, but due to some interesting delays, we are here with it now. But before we get into that, I do want to say, if you want to help out the channel in any way, you can like, share, and subscribe, because of course all that stuff is free. Step above that is my subscribe star, where you get a lot of additional content for free, including some very cool Form 1 suppressor content. I just recently got this tested and engraved, all that sort of fun stuff, so we were all good to go on that. That'll be coming up soon, exclusively on there for a while, and then eventually some of that will come to YouTube, but some of it I can't show on YouTube, so most of that stuff will only be on Subscribestar. On top of that, I also make AR-500 steel targets at the first link in the description on Focus Shooting LLC. We have our new targets in stock. We have hangers and other stuff on the way, but that stuff should be coming in the next week or two. And last up, to the YouTube reviewer watching this video, all footage was filmed in a controlled environment on private property and private ranges. On top of that, we are talking about an upper receiver in its original configuration that has not been modified, and it is of course not a firearm because it is just an upper receiver that we're talking about. Now, the specific upper receiver is the Bear Creek Arsenal, which is again a company I've done a lot of work for in the past. Not really work for, but I've reviewed their products and they've sent me stuff. This one here was also sent to me by Bear Creek Arsenal. No money changing hands. I did have to spend quite a bit of ammo testing it, and I will continue to shoot it as time goes on. Now, I also have a coupon code for Bear Creek Arsenal on any upper that I've reviewed. You can get 5% off of that on top of free shipping. I believe it'll be in the description. If not, you can check my website, it'll be on there. But basically, no money changing hands. I don't make any money off of the links. They just send me a product and I get to say whatever I want to about it. So as I mentioned in the preamble, I had wanted to bring this upper receiver to review several weeks ago, but we had a parts break. So I want to be completely upfront. I did have an extractor shear off. This is a 7.62 by 39, 10.5 inch pistol upper receiver, though it may not be a pistol for very long, if you guys get where I'm going with that. 10.5 inch side charging, 7.62 by 39, as I mentioned, and I'll show some inch-set footage. Basically the extractor breaking. Now, the extractor sheared off during firing, nothing too crazy. I was at about 700 rounds at the time, and I was just at the beginning of my next range day. I wanted to get some more filming done and push it up closer to 1,000 rounds, and you know, kind of then do my review after about 1,000 rounds from 7.62 by 39. Now, recently I've been getting into 7.62 by 39 in the AR-15 platform because it's very, very cheap to do so right now compared to 5.56 and other calibers. So after the extractor broke, I had to reach out to their customer service to get a new extractor sent out. It did take about 7 to 10 days, but everybody is super busy right now and lots of low stock. But what they ended up sending out to me was 2 brand new extractors, not just one to replace it, but they also sent me about 3 to 5 complete bolt rebuild kits, including springs, washers, O-rings, everything that you need to rebuild a bolt is in here. So they sent me more than enough. So if after the next 1,000 rounds of testing, I have another sheared extractor, I have another backup one on top of that. And on top of that, I did actually reach out to another company, Black Rifle Arms, and I purchased another 762x39 Type 2 extractor from them. And so I'll have several backup extractors in case I run into this problem in the future, which I kind of believe that I will. Now, the price on these upper receivers is very good. I believe right now on Bear Creek Arsenal's website, with again free shipping and 5% off if you use my code, I believe they're like $340, maybe a little bit less than that. And again, that's shipped to your door, complete with the Bolt Carrier Group and charging handle, or in this case, just the side charging handle that you see here on the Bolt Carrier Group. It's a very good deal right now. We'll get into the specifics. Let's go ahead and start out with the barrel. So the barrel is a 10.5 inch barrel. It is their heavy profile barrel, so it is about an inch thick up to the carbine length gas block up here. It is very heavy, and that in turn also translates to accuracy. I like heavy barrels if they're accurate. If they are not accurate, then they are a complete waste in my opinion, and just a lot of extra material that you don't need. So it has a carbine length gas system, as I mentioned, so you only have about 2 inches of dwell time on this barrel, which again, I really like. I like pushing that gas system out as far as you can. It is a dimpled barrel, and it does come with a very simple standard steel gas block, which again, perfectly fine in my opinion. It's shipped with an A2 birdcage flash hider, and I swapped that out for this QD 3-prong flash hider, which just to talk about 10.5 762x39 for a minute. It does have quite a bit of blast and flash on it, so if you're running a muzzle brake, you're going to get a ton of flash. If you use an A2 flash hider, you're going to get a decent amount of flash, but any sort of 3-prong muzzle device will, by and large, reduce basically all of the flash. If I was going with just a dedicated 3-prong flash hider like this big guy, this does an excellent job and basically reduces the flash about 100% if you use a real dedicated 3-prong flash hider. The one currently that's on here is fairly small, but again, it's more of a suppressor mount than just a dedicated flash hider. Now, as I mentioned, the barrel is extremely heavy and it's also extremely accurate. I did a lot of testing with different rounds, specifically using Red Army Standard 123, Tula 123 grain, and also Hornady Black 123 grain ammunition to see how well it grouped. And honestly, the best results that I got were actually with the Red Army Standard, the really heavy lacquered stuff with 123 grain projectile, I believe is what it is. And at 50 yards, what I was getting was a little bit over a ½ inch with, again, steel cased ammunition at 50 yards. So that is right at 1 MOA with steel cased ammunition. The Hornady Black was like 0.6 inches center to center, and the Tula was about the same. So I really didn't get much variance from round to round, which is also awesome. So you're looking with really crappy steel cased ammunition, probably about 1.5 MOA average at 100 yards with 5-shot groups, down to about 1 MOA on a good day and 2 MOA on a bad day, again, depending on ammunition, all that other fun stuff. That to me is absolutely excellent. And 7.62x39 gets kind of a bad rap for accuracy because, of course, its most popular platform is an AK, and an AK is just not as accurate as a free-floated AR-15 style upper receiver, which is what we have right here. Now, there are, of course, tons of advantages to an AK. Basically, the way it works with 7.62x39 is basically perfect. It's very durable, and of course the piston system helps to keep a lot of the heat and the gunk off of the bolt, which is one of the problems that I had with this upper receiver. So moving back from there, let's go ahead and talk about the Bolt Carrier Group. So the Bolt Carrier Group is a standard side charging upper receiver. If you've watched any of my other videos on Bear Creek Arsenal side charging uppers, whether it's the 20-inch AR-10 or the 10.5.556 upper receiver that I've done videos on, it's exactly the same as that. You have a just under an inch long, very knurled charging handle that's easy to grab, makes clearing malfunctions very easy, doubles as a forward assist and a shell deflector. Something that I do want to back up for just a second. The barrel on this is extremely well gassed. It is a a 4150 steel barrel, and it is perfectly gassed for steel cased ammunition, ejecting at around 3:30 to 4 o'clock most of the time. On top of that, I also have another upper receiver, actually from Delta Team Tactical, that we're going to talk about later, has the exact same Bear Creek Arsenal barrel in it, and it is also perfectly gassed at, again, around 3:30 to 4 o'clock with steel cased ammunition. Again, perfectly gassed, and it allows the Bolt Carrier Group to last as long as possible because, again, it's very soft, so it's not going to overly beat it up, even using a more snappy cartridge like 7.62x39. It's a very, very smooth upper receiver. I will show you some of the footage in slow motion. It barely moves as long as you have it set up properly, and so it will make the bolt last as long as it can without having to beat it up too harshly. Now, the Sarge Charging Upper is cool, and I really like it in 7.62x39 because there are going to be issues with magazines, and a lot of the times you're going to be using really crappy ammunition. That being said, apart from parts breakages, this upper receiver was 100% reliable for about 1,000 rounds. On top of that, there were also some magazine issues. As you'll see some of the inset footage, some of them do not lock back, some of them do not drop free. The only magazines that I or really anyone else recommends for any AR-15 in 7.62x39 is the C Products Duramax. So I picked up about 5 of those, and those are what I will be using most of the time. I also tried the ASC FDE mags. They were fine. They actually were better than the Pro Mag magazines, which I originally purchased with the gun. Those were good for a little while, and then I left them full overnight because I was going on a range trip the next day, so I loaded them up the night before, left them full, and then they really decided to stop working on me, which was pretty terrible in my opinion. So avoid Pro Mag should just be your mantra normally, or your mantra normally, but especially when it comes to 7.62x39 for an AR-15. So now let's go ahead and get into the Bolt and the Bolt Carrier Group. Not so much the Bolt Carrier Group. The Bolt Carrier Group is just a fairly standard side charging, so it does not have slide serrations on the side because, of course, you're not going to be using a forward assist because you have that charging handle that works as your forward assist. On top of that, it does not have that cutout for your dust cover because, again, there is no dust cover on a side charging upper receiver. So other than that, very good. The staking on it, on the gas key, again, very, very good. No issues there. It does use the YFS screws, which are not as strong as the grade 8 steel screws. So not quite mil spec there, but again, haven't had any issues with them. The one thing that I do want to say is that it does ship with a standard firing pin, so depending on the ammunition you're shooting, you may have some issues with light primer strikes. I did get a couple light primer strikes, but then I switched to a heavier trigger. I had kind of not a reduced power spring, but I had a little bit of a lighter spring set up in some of the initial testing I did, and then after I switched to a heavy Palmetto State Armory enhanced Pulse trigger, which does use full power springs, then it was perfectly fine after that, but I did have some slight issues with light primer strikes in the initial testing. Again, that's a trigger issue, not a upper receiver issue. Now, getting into the bolt itself, this is where things get a little janky with a standard AR-15 style bolt. To accommodate the much thicker case of a 7.62x39, you have to remove a lot of the material from the bolt face itself to accommodate that bigger case. So what that means is there's a couple things you can do. So CMMG basically uses an AR-10 style bolt in their AR-15 bolt carrier to allow them to start with a lot more material, so that even though they have to take out more than a standard AR-15, you still get left with a much chunkier, much beefier, much stronger bolt in the end. Whereas if you start with a standard AR-15 bolt, what you end up is a very thin line around it, which can lead to cracking and other issues because there's just not a lot of material there to absorb all of that energy, because it is a higher energy round. It's not a hot round, but it's a higher energy round than a 5.56, and so it is going to wear a lot harder on your components. On top of that, it is, of course, there's less material there in general. Most of the issues that come from a 7.62x39 bolt in an AR-15 gun, again, a standard size without doing something weird like the CMMG does, which is a better solution, but it is a more expensive solution, which is why they can charge thousands of dollars for their guns, of course, comes from the extractor and the bolt itself. So the extractor that Bear Creek Arsenal is using is incredibly strong. So it uses the standard spring plus a O-ring on there, so it has an immense amount of pressure when extracting, which is good. I never had any issues with extraction until, of course, the extractor sheared off on the end. The issue is that there is just less material there. So if you side by side it with a standard AR-15 bolt, this one here is a Type 2 bolt, so there's Type 1 and Type 2, 7.62x39 and 6.5 Grendel bolts. They're essentially the same. But the Type 2 has a bolt face depth of 0.136 and the Type 1 of 0.125. There are some people who say the Type 2 is better and some people who say the Type 1 is better. Regardless of that argument, Bear Creek Arsenal uses a Type 2 bolt face, so if you have a 6.5 Grendel Type 2 bolt, it will actually work, but you cannot use a Type 1 extractor on a Type 2 bolt. It's not going to jive quite right because the extractor is not in the right place. But the extractor being a little bit longer on a Type 2 bolt does seem to add a little bit more wear. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but most people that are running these guys always have issues with the extractor. So now there's a couple ways to get around that. LMT makes a very, very well-regarded AR-15 bolt for 7.62x39. The problem that I personally have with that is that it's around $300. Am I going to spend $300 on just the bolt, for an upper receiver that cost, again, about the same amount, or in my case was free? I'm probably not. Now, if this was a serious home defense, duty gun, whatever you wanted that to be, then of course I would spend that $300. That $300 is a must-have if it's in any sort of serious application. For me, though, this is a target gun, and this is a gun that I can shoot, I can test optics, I can test accessories on, and still not break the bank. Basically, once I got this upper receiver and I knew I had it coming, I went and spent several $100s on about 2,000 rounds of ammunition, and I still have access to really decently priced 7.62x39 locally, so I am very happy with it. So I'm going to be using this more as like a testing platform, a range gun. It gives you a lot of really good practice because, again, it does have more recoil than a standard 5.56, but there are some drawbacks. So as of right now, as I mentioned earlier, I have 3 backup extractors. There is another extractor, the KAK Industries. They have an enhanced 7.62x39 extractor, which is also good. It's not quite that expensive. It's like 50, 60 bucks, depending on if you can find it in stock. I could not find it in stock. Otherwise, I would have personally ordered that because that's a 50 to 60 bucks is not that much money to ask for enhanced reliability. And again, if it lasts me even just 2,000 rounds, that's cheaper than going out and buying a $20 extractor over and over and over and over again every 500 to 700 rounds. Now, the new extractor that I have in there is from Bear Creek Arsenal. As I mentioned, it does have some pretty decent wear on it. So after the first one broke at 700 rounds, I installed the new one after I received it again. Took about 10 days. Took it back out, ran about 300 rounds through it, half of that suppressed, half of that unsuppressed. And it ran just fine. It does have some visual wear on it. Some of the finish is gone because, again, I'm only expecting these extractors, and I'm kind of budgeting for these extractors to go out at least every 1,000 rounds, which even if I have to buy an extractor every 1,000 rounds, shooting 1,000 rounds of 7.62x39 is still saving me about $400 versus 5.56, so that $20 extractor doesn't really matter to me all that much. And again, not a serious gun, a range and a testing gun for me. Now let's go ahead and get into another topic that I'm not really qualified to talk about, but this happened in my specific experience. I treat this bolt carrier group like I would an AR-10 bolt. For those of you who don't know, AR-10s can be very, very finicky, especially when they get gunked up. DI guns dump a lot of carbon and a lot of junk into their bolt carrier groups, and the bolt carrier groups get really hot really quickly. So the main problem that I have with 7.62x39 versus like 5.56 is I can run a 5.56 for 2,000 rounds without cleaning it, and I don't even care. It's not really a thought in the back of my head that it's gonna fail. I know that it's just gonna run and run and run, and I can tell by the ejection pattern if something is drastically off, like if it's just barely getting enough force to cycle, then, you know, I'm like, okay, hey, I need to take it apart, clean it, diagnose the issue. With 7.62x39, take that 2,000 rounds and bring it down to about 500 rounds. So after I got this to about 500 rounds on the initial extractor, the bolt was so gunked up and so inoperable, it felt like it was metal on metal almost inside of the bolt, moving it forward and backwards was incredibly difficult. So at only 500 rounds, it was getting towards the point of unreliability. It was not unreliable at that point, but it was getting to that area. So like with my AR-10s, I do a complete bolt clean after every 500 rounds, and I will treat this 7.62x39 the exact same way. You're using really, really cheap ammunition, and on top of that, the difference between an AR-15 and 7.62x39 and an AK and 7.62x39 is the AK is of course a piston gun, so it keeps that garbage and gunk all up front in the piston, not back in your bolt carrier group. Guns tend to work the best around with the caliber that they were built around. AR-15s work nearly perfectly with 5.56. AKs work nearly perfectly with 5.45 and 7.62x39. But when you try to put a lot of different calibers and kind of expand the scope of the original design, it can work well, or it can work well sometimes. And I think this is one of those areas where 7.62x39 has a lot of advantages actually in an AR-15 platform. For instance, it's very, very soft shooting versus an AK, which is generally overgassed, and they're generally piston operated, of course, so they're a little bit more violent of a recoil cycle. So an AR-15 is much softer shooting in 7.62x39, and it is much more accurate in 7.62x39 versus an AK. But the downside of all that is the bolt design is not really designed around 7.62x39, where an AK, if you look at an AK bolt, it is incredibly strong and incredibly simple, and it just does its job over and over and over again. And again, it doesn't have to deal with all that gunk coming back into the bolt, and also helps keep it cooler because, of course, that piston system, again, leaves the heat up front, not so much in the bolt carrier group itself. So then to make an AR-15 as reliable as an AK in 7.62x39, you really only have a couple options. You have to either buy something that's incredibly expensive, like the LMT bolt in 7.62x39 for an AR-15, which is around $300, but it's built to the highest specifications, the best material, the best thought out design to give it the best reliability possible. Or you have to go like the CMMG route, where they use a completely different bolt face and everything that only works in their guns to give it that extra strength and durability that it needs to hold on to that, not harder, but more powerful cartridge that is harder on your components than just 5.56. So if you were to ask me if I recommend this to someone else in 7.62x39, the simple answer is yes, but the longer answer is that you need to be aware that you are going to be going through extractors and possibly other parts on your bolt carrier group as well. Now, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I really need something, and I just need one thing, and this is gonna be my home defense gun, my everything gun, probably not, just because I can't guarantee that that bolt is going to hold together. But if this is, again, more of a fun gun, a training gun, target gun, any of those other things, absolutely excellent, totally worth the money, and will save you a ton in shooting right now. Just within the first 1,000 rounds, it will save you the cost of the upper receiver itself versus 5.56. So if you're going to shoot 1,000 rounds of 7.62x39, you could buy this upper and 1,000 rounds of 7.62x39 for the same cost of 1,000 rounds of 5.56. So for saving money for target practice range gun, absolutely awesome. But there are a few other details that we're just going to get into right now. Now, I know that was a long tangent about 7.62x39 and an AR-15, but let's talk about the few other things that are really cool about this upper receiver specifically. First off, a really nice handguard. They do a really good job with their MLOK handguards. They're very slim. They're also strong. They're slim, but as I've said before, they're not very thin in terms of the material used. So it is 60-61 or 70-75. I don't remember exactly which material it is, but high quality aluminum, well designed, MLOK on the 3, 6, and 9 positions, which is plenty for me. Not very heavy and very slim, fits in the hand really well. The only thing I have mounted to it right now is a small Picatinny section over here for my QD adapter for my sling that I run. We'll get into that in a minute. Back on the upper receiver itself, it is a billet upper receiver. This is not a forged upper receiver. So you have your billet cut out for your charging handle and, you know, extra debris. In the back here, what we have is we have an actual plug. So this guy right here screws and unscrews, which is actually really nice for suppressed shooting because you don't really get any of that extra blowback coming through where your charging handle normally would. So in that regards, I actually really like having this plug in the back. The only real knock that I have against the upper receiver is that it does still use the older mounting method, which is very, very strong. So it's mounted directly to your barrel nut, and it uses a 6-screw method. So on the 3, 6, and 9 position, you have 2 screws that are torqued down. Everything came to me torqued down to spec, so I don't have any issues with that whatsoever. And again, I haven't modified it whatsoever, and it just continues to run, which I really, really like. Other than that, it's fairly standard and not a lot to write home about. They do make a split MLOK version, which would probably be a little bit cooler in my opinion. So if you're planning on picking up one and that one there is in stock, that is probably the one that I would go with. But this is, again, if you're not planning on changing out the handguards, this does work really, really well. And again, in spec MLOK, and it looks good as well, I would say. Last thing before we talk about the setup itself is I do want to say that Bear Creek Arsenal's machining work and their finishing and their tolerances has gotten a lot better since some of their first uppers that I've bought and tested out. For instance, the lock and unlock on this bolt is very, very smooth. It feels like glass, like it's riding on rails or something like that. It's very, very good, very smooth. I did recently clean this because, again, after shooting it suppressed for about 300 rounds, half on, half off, very, very dirty. It does get very dirty very quickly in a AR-15 chambered in 7.62x39, but the lock and unlock is incredibly smooth, very, very nice on their part. Alrighty, so really quickly on the setup, guys, we are running it on a Anderson lower receiver, very cheap, but it again works most of the time. We have a Palmetto State Armory enhanced trigger, which is about 5.5, 6 pounds, but it has a very positive reset and full powered springs, which I really like. We are running the soon to be outlawed SPA3 pistol brace, or stock, if you will, soon, depending on how the ATF thinks about this. On top, we are running really cheap Trinity Force iron sights. If you noticed, a lot of the footage was just me shooting these iron sights because they are capable enough and they hold position really well on lighter calibers like 5.56 and 7.62x39. 7.62x39 is towards the top end of what I would put them on. I did put them on a 308, or actually I have them on my 308, but they do not hold up very well. They like to flop around with 308 recoil. Now, moving up to the top here, something that I know I am going to be getting some questions about is this optic setup. So what we have here, this is the new Northtac Ronin P12 optic. It's not quite released yet. It may be released when the video goes up in a couple days, but as of right now, not released. I really like it. A good improvement so far over the previous generation. We are running the SIG Juliet Micro 3, which is an awesome magnifier for the money. So much better than the HoloSun VMX3 and the Vortex 3X magnifier. Not the new one, but the older one. So much better than both of those. And we're running that on a UTG 1/2-inch riser. I think it's one of the best risers on the market, and again, it only costs about $13. So I might have a video specifically on it. I'm running 3 of them right now. They are very, very good, very high quality, incredibly strong, and they do a really good job, and they don't charge you $200 to do it. So I really appreciate that part of it. So that's about it for the build, guys. I was running a Sentinel sling from GroveTech. This one here was sent out to me by GroveTech, and I will be doing a video on it in the future. But it's a really nice sling. It's incredibly comfy, big padded sling, and you can pick them up for fairly cheap. Has a really nice strap there, if you guys can see that. It's a little dark in this video, but that's about it for the video, guys. So again, like I mentioned, if you want to help out the channel in any way, you can like, share, and subscribe. Other than that, I have Subscribestar, and I also have steel plates. On my website is also a guns and gear section, so it has all of the deals, my discount codes, affiliate links, everything should be on there, and it's getting expanded every day as I have to personally add it myself, so that's kind of fun. But that's it for the video, guys. Let me know what you guys think of this upper receiver in the comments down below, or if there's any other sort of budget 7.62x39 gun I should check out, as I have quite a bit of that ammo and I have access to it locally. So thank you guys again for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.